Franco. Thank you.
Thank you, Alessandra. So, dear colleagues, friends and participants, good morning. It is a pleasure for me to be here today, and allow me first to thank Giovanni and Werner, the two presidents, for their kind invitation to this conference, and also for the work they carry on within the G20. As you all know, we are now gradually approaching the end of the Italian G20 presidency, and this is an important opportunity for me to share with you some reflections before the G20 ministers and central bank governors meeting in mid-October in Washington, D.C., and eventually the G20 leaders summit, which will take place in Rome at the end of October. During this intense year, our presidency has strived to promote the collaboration with all engagement groups contributing to the G20 agenda with different perspectives. Today's conference marks another important opportunity to enhance the dialogue between governments, long-term investors, and the private sector on how we can stimulate long-term sustainable growth in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic. Within the Italian G20 presidency, we had, as you know, it was mentioned earlier, a three-pillar framework: people, planet, prosperity. Within this framework, infrastructure is set to play a critical role. Well-designed investment in infrastructure that incorporates sustainability criteria will allow to unlock our growth potential and make growth more resilient and long-lasting. As part of this approach, on June the 3rd, we organized the first edition of the 2021 G20 Infrastructure Investors Dialogue on financing sustainable infrastructure for the recovery, with available and close collaboration of the G20 Long-Term Investors Club and the OECD. It was a very successful event that brought together distinguished speakers from G20 government, investors, national and multinational development banks and businesses. I would like to touch upon the main key takeaways from the June conference. First, the importance of public investment, especially today. Not only investing in infrastructure can kickstart the recovery and promote a sustained growth, it is also particularly appropriate that policymakers do it now, given that public investment turns out particularly effective in junctions as the current one. According to the IMF, during periods of high uncertainty, the multiplier of public investment on our output is larger than in normal times. This is a point already made earlier on. It is also found to have a strong effect on employment. Finally, public investment can exert a much stronger expansionary effect on private investment at times of high uncertainty, thus dispelling concerns of crowding out effects. This brings me to the second point of my talk, the involvement of the private sector and institutional investors. Financing infrastructure necessarily requires the mobilization of their resources over long-term horizons. According to the Global Infrastructure Hub, even before the pandemic, the long-standing infrastructure financing gap was set to reach $15 trillion by 2040, and to be even higher if sustainable infrastructure needs are not adequately taken into account. Given this order of magnitude, it is clear that meeting the infrastructure needs in advanced and developing countries cannot be driven only by the policymakers' initiatives. Especially in the aftermath of the COVID-19 crisis, this objective has to be fully shared by firms, investors, and market players. Development finance institutions can play an important role in the effort to mobilize capital towards quality infrastructure investments. First, by providing a bridge between the public and the private sectors, by reducing real and perceived risk through dedicated financial instruments, such as equity and debt co-investment vehicles that facilitate funding for riskier infrastructure projects and attract and leverage additional private resources. Second, by ensuring their support in the form of technical assistance programs to companies and national and local authorities, particularly in developing countries, to create an enabling environment for investment and help them preparing and managing quality infrastructure projects and project pipelines. Third, by prioritizing investment in innovative and sustainable infrastructure projects in their mandates and strategic plans in line with the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN 2030 Agenda. Following the June conference, the G20 presidency has been working in close collaboration with the D20 Long-Term Investor Club and the OECD to finalize an outcome document which collects a set of proposed actions to strengthen the collaboration between public and private actors for years to come and mobilize infrastructure investment. The D20 annual statement presented today is very much aligned with the key messages and the proposed actions included in the outcome document. The latter will be presented at the next G20 Finance Minister and Central Bank Governors meeting in October, where, for the first time in its history, the D20 will be invited to attend. And we are very happy about that. As the next G20 presidency, Indonesia has already committed to continue the dialogue between governments, long-term investors, and the private sector in 2022. As a member of the G20 Troika of the presidencies, Italy will support next year Indonesia in hosting the second edition of the dialogue to make progress in creating the right condition for increasing private investment in infrastructure while promoting inclusive growth, development, and sustainability. The mention of sustainability brings me to the third point of my intervention, the importance of investing in environmentally sustainable infrastructure as a powerful engine for climate change mitigation and adaptation. Infrastructure construction and development have a significant environmental footprint. It is clear that a careful and forward-looking planning of infrastructure can have a strong impact on climate and also on the environment, minimizing land degradation, air pollution, and biodiversity loss. In addition, environmentally sustainable infrastructure is a powerful engine for quality job creation, given the low-carbon sector are more labor-intensive than high-carbon ones. Finally, public investment in green infrastructure will not only generate positive demand effects, but also favor adjustment on the supply side. It may in fact enable the private sector to adopt new technologies in a more cost-effective and fast way. Indeed, there is sound evidence that the private sector, including banks, insurance, pension funds, and sovereign wealth funds, has a growing appetite for sustainable infrastructure. This interest clearly also emerged at the first G20 Infrastructure Investors Dialogue. At the same time, the conference confirmed that relevant barriers remain that prevent to unlock the full potential for private investment in infrastructure. Particularly for institutional investors, the long-term nature of infrastructure assets exposes them to the risks of disruption over time, including those arising from environmental factors. As policymakers, our role is to address these challenges. Under our presidency, the G20 has worked to promote the mobilization of capital towards sustainable goals, an issue shared by the G20 as reflected in its 2021 statement. In particular, we have put at the core of our G20 agenda the need to promote the availability, quality, and comparability of data on environmental, social, and governance factors, ESG factors, which are crucial for investment performance and impact assessment. As G20, we aim at reaching consensus over general principles and rules on taxonomies, disclosure, and reporting frameworks. This is a priority area of the Sustainable Finance Working Group that the Italian presidency successfully re-established at the beginning of this year, and which has now become a permanent G20 working group. Let me conclude. Continuing the dialogue with all relevant stakeholders, especially long-term investors, asset managers, and the wider international community, is key to inform the formulation and implementation of the G20 infrastructure agenda. Only through shared efforts we will be able to achieve the goal of bridging the infrastructure investment gap and aligning investments with environmental sustainability and development goals. As part of this G20 outreach effort, allow me also to invite you to the G20 high-level conference on local infrastructure investment, which will take place on September the 27th, that is next Monday, in Genoa. The conference will gather representatives of local administrative entities from G20 countries, international organizations, and multilateral development banks, seeking to encourage the information and knowledge sharing between the different stakeholders that can contribute to building more sustainable and inclusive quality local infrastructure. We have done a lot, but we need to do more. I look forward to hearing your views and to collect input from the G20. I would like to thank all of you for your work within the G20. I think this work will have to continue far beyond the Italian presidency. So thank you very much for your attention.